there's got to be people just like me that have this fear and are scared to do something. What if I just jump outside the comfort zone just a little bit and I'm the one that branches out and does something, and maybe we can inspire people that maybe are just behind me on the journey that need that, that extra push. So I'm not just giving you like, oh, do this. I'm helping you so that you can learn where your faults are and you can improve on your own well after you're working with me. The amount of people I've been able to get to, the conversation, I mean, I literally have like an MBA without paying hundreds of thousands of dollars, because I've talked with some of the most impressive, entrepreneurs and founders in the world, purely just by reaching out to them and asking if they wanted to be on the show. And how does your name, when you're not around, what's your reputation? What do people say about you when you're not around? That's always something I always kind of think about. And that's why I always want to put positivity out in the world. Like, that's just how I am as a person.
Ryan, how you doing, man? It's great to be chatting.
Yeah, nice to chat with you. Appreciate you having me on.
Of course. I'd love for you, because you've got a few things going on here. You've got your branded t-shirt, you've got your podcast. I'd love for you to kind of give your high-level personal intro so the folks know who you are, what you do, and we'll dive into some stories, some expertise, some opinions, some advice, and it's going to be a really valuable conversation. So let's just get right to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate it. I think the easiest way is maybe to how I think about my journey now versus even 5-10 years ago. So I really define where I'm at today with one word, as a navigator, and really helping navigate people to, people that are stuck, that are lost, that are, maybe uncertain about the future. How do I help them? I call it my compass framework. Like, how do I help them point forward in a better direction? So yeah, I'm doing a lot of different stuff. It started really, like, I'll give you the inflection point that really is the most, and where this Just Get Started, the t-shirt and everything comes from, is the Just Get Started podcast that I decided to start in. And it started November 2017 now, but the idea came to me a few months prior. Yeah. But the reason it's called Just Get Started is because I had wanted to start a podcast for 2 years before that. And I just had all of this fear and uncertainty and self-doubt and no confidence. And I was so scared about what other people were going to say, like, oh my God, because it was so different than any of the people I surrounded myself with. But I just really had this drive to want to do a podcast for a variety of different reasons. And so, yeah, I started it, and it was called Just Get Started. I'm like, there's got to be people just like me that have this fear and are scared to do something. What if I just jump outside the comfort zone just a little bit, and I'm the one that branches out and does something? And then I wanted to do an interview show. I interview people that are also doing that. And maybe we can inspire people that maybe are just behind me on the journey that need that, that extra push. So that's where this Just Get Started mission. And it's something that's evolved I do the podcast. I write a blog 3 times a week. I'm publishing my 3rd children's book that'll launch October 23rd of this year. I do sales mentorship. So I love coaching. So I do personal coaching, but I really love the sales side because I have a sales background. I've been in software sales for a dozen years now, and other sales before that. So I just really love helping sales professionals. But really, for me, it's the mix of entrepreneurs and founders, because what I find is a lot of sales resources and training goes toward the bigger companies that have a huge budget, that, have all the resources. And it's kind of watered down training. It's generalized. What I found that works best is one-to-one, hyper intensive training, because you're going to be different than someone else. So how do I actually help folks? Not just here, do this. It's kind of like so here's a quick aside. I used to be a PJ professional. I was a golf professional, was my first career out of college. And I did that for many years. I still love golf, and I love teaching. I'll teach my son and my girlfriend. I've taught some friends and stuff, but I don't teach as a professional level anymore. But I always love that aspect of teaching golf, where, like, I'm not just giving you like, oh, do this. I'm helping you so that you can learn where your faults are and you can improve on your own well after you're working with me. Right. So that's how I take it in my sales coaching. It's not like, okay, do this, write this email this way, and then you have to keep coming back to me. Yeah, I want to work with you for a while because there's different skills to build. But how do I give you the confidence to build those systems and skills yourself so that you can take that into calls? Because you're going to be there on your own. You got to be able to do that. So anyways, that's kind of where I'm at today. I got a lot of irons in the fire, but I enjoy every friggin' minute of it.
I love it. And the mood is infectious. I can just tell the energy and enthusiasm has, if anything, only increased since that jump into getting started. And really, I just recently, we mentioned this actually because you had reached out to me. We started a conversation before I had rebranded the podcast. So I
Mhm.
said, let's pick this conversation up once I've rebranded it. And when I first was doing the podcast, the Lewis and Kyle show, my qualification was just like, I felt like this person was worth talking to, or Kyle felt like this person was worth talking to. And
Right.
now that I'm, doing it as part of a real business with employees and, collaborators and things like that, under the Orbit marketing name, I like actually have to have some sort of like systematized rule for like
Mhm.
who I'm saying yes to and who I'm like, hey, it's not quite a good fit right now. And really for me, that qualification, among other things, is that content creation has been a cornerstone of your career or your business or your lead gen. Just content is an important aspect of
Mhm.
your life at this point, right? It's like it's an important thing that I do. So you're writing, right? Not obviously, and as we discussed before, we're in the email marketing business. That's vast majority of what we do for clients.
Mhm.
But across the board, I want people to see the big picture of hearing from people all the ways in which content is positively impacting every other area of life, right? Obviously, in terms of lead generation and in terms of professional opportunities, but also like the personal enrichment and the networking that comes from it
Mhm.
and the learning and improving and clarification of your own ideas. So, I'm just thrilled to be chatting with you as someone who's just multidimensional with content as a cornerstone that contributes to everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think one of the things to mention that I think that's so valuable is, and maybe just like you, I didn't have any network before starting this. Like I had a small group of peers. I had people in the sales world. I had friends and colleagues and acquaintances. I had some mentors and stuff, but like it's not like I made some call to some big celebrity and all of a sudden, because you see this all the time, like celebrities will start podcasts and they're widely successful. Well, of course they should be because they have a big following, they're known or whatever. So one of the things I pride myself on is I started this from literally ground zero. It's still small. I'm not Tony Robbins out there on the stage. Like it's still very small, but the amount of people I've been able to get to, the conversation. I mean, I literally have like an MBA without paying
Yep.
hundreds of thousands of dollars because I've talked with some of the most impressive, entrepreneurs and founders in the world purely just by reaching out to them and asking if they wanted to be on the show. And what I feel like and the feedback I've gotten is I do a good interview, right? I ask good questions. I'm very curious. And like that kind of reverberates, I guess, as you go from episode to episode. So, now being, I mean, I've launched like 450 now. I didn't put a number on a lot of the solo episodes early on. So I think the one that just launched was number 430. This week with Chris Hutchins, actually, which I love his All the Hacks podcast. And so I reached out to him. I
He's the
said, "Hey,
marketer, right?
what's that?"
Like
Chris,
Chris, the marketer.
no,
Oh,
Chris
that's Chris
Hutchins.
Smith.
He has a podcast called All the Hacks. It's super cool podcast. And but I've been listening to that for a while. And I just reached out and said, Chris, we'd love to be on the podcast. And he's like, sure, let's do it. So that's what's been kind of fun is building the consistency over time to create all this content purely just for the love of actually enjoying talking to people, enjoy writing and those type of things. So yeah, it's been a fun journey so far.
Now I'm looking at his whole ecosystem. Looks like an awesome creator. I love that. I was looking through your list of recent episodes as I was doing my research, and I saw even that you recently had both DHH and Jason from kind
Yeah.
of the Basecamp universe. And those are two very iconic entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And I don't
Super
know if
fun.
there's a question there, but the different ways that you create credibility with one, networking with kind of other, you can call them like business nerds, if you will, like people like me. I'm referring to myself as the business nerd, but like, no one on the street's going to care about, maybe if you're in San Fran, about DHH and Jason. But in
Right.
terms of like anyone who's been building a company and reading business books and very online and interested in that whole subculture, like that just immediately signals to me, oh, you've been doing this for. I looked on YouTube and see your most popular episode was with Seth Godin, and it's like,
Mhm.
oh, there's all of those signals of credibility that come from. Even though I hadn't heard of you before, now there's just a whole. I'm seeing you in a different perception, all positive from those
Yeah.
associations.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think the big thing, like for me, has been, and I've been, I guess you can call it fortunate, but it's also, as you may know, it gets overwhelming with people that reach out to be on the episodes because they've, for whatever reason, I don't know how whoever searches for podcasts, but now the podcast comes up a lot. It's whatever, it's in the top 1.5% in the world, whatever that means, kind of thing. Probably because I've had so many episodes over so many years. But I get a lot of people reaching out like, oh, you should have this guest or that guest. And it's like, I can't take everyone on.
Yep.
But I have taken several. But all those people, like, yeah, having Jason and DHH, and even I had Mike from Butcher Box. A lot of these
I saw that. Yep. I reached out to him years ago, and he didn't say yes. I got to try that again. But it might be breaking my own rules. I just like beef, and that's not enough of a reason to bring him on the show.
I mean, if you want to talk to him, I mean, I'll make a connection. We can chat offline. He's a cool dude. But but the reason is I used Butcher Box for a lot of years, right? I used Basecamp back in 2011 for several years. Like Seth Godin, I read his blog every morning. Like I've had a lot of these people on that I just enjoy what they do, and they've given me so much, I guess, help over the years that I was like, I want to talk to them. So I mean, again, some people have not got back to me or said, hey, I couldn't do it. Or, I've been reaching out to Stephen Pressfield for, a year and a half, 2 years. And we have email exchanges like, Brian, not the time, or I can't do it here. That's cool. I get it. But hey, I'm at least got connection. Some people just don't have the time. So, and yeah, for me, it's been really cool to get people on that I've been inspired by. And in turn, yeah, to your point, it does, I guess, build credibility. Like, hey, if you're talking to so-and-so, well, then that must mean something about you. And I think that's important as well. Anything with networking, right? How does your name, when you're not around, what's your reputation? What do people say about you when you're not around? That's always something I always kind of think about. And that's why I always want to put positivity out in the world. Like, that's just how I am as a person. And I want to be, when those conversations are happening, maybe I'm not there. What are people saying about Brian? Hopefully, like you said, they're good things, good positive vibe that comes out of it.
I love it. One thing that you said that, I'm going to twist it a little bit, that I just really enjoyed was kind of this idea of, you see a celebrity and then they launch XYZ and you go, well, of course they succeeded. They have XYZ advantage. And I feel like that's almost something that, after you put out enough content, I don't know if you're familiar with this guy, Daniel Fazio. He's kind of, I don't want to say brash. He's aggressive. He's funny. I love his content. He's just very loud, maybe is a good description for him, but he's also very bright. And I was watching a video of his this morning just while making breakfast, and he kind of had this idea of like how to spawn money, right? Which is basically saying anyone you've ever sold anything to, and the fastest way to make money, like there's two groups of people in the world, right? There's people who've already given you money in exchange for services before, and there's people who have never given you money in exchange for your services before. So the fastest way to make money is to ask that first group to give you more money for another service. And so I think about kind of, this is like combining a series of ideas here, but for you in the position you're in now with having 400 episodes, and if a business has established some online audience or some distribution, people are going to be saying that about you. Like, you're going to launch a service to your existing list of warm people that you've been building through this podcast. Like, well, of course, like, I wasn't surprised to see that you had David and Jason on your podcast, because it's like, you've been doing 400 episodes. Of course you're able to get those people. Right. It's like, of course you have those opportunities once you've put in if you had them on episode 1, I would have said, oh, it's only because he's famous or whatever. But it's like, yeah, this is episode 400. There's no way you haven't earned by now the credibility, the skill to create these bigger and better opportunities. Like, I'm not surprised. Like, I'm certainly impressed, but I'm also like, well, of course, like, you've put in the work for so long, and this is something that you've kind of listed as one of your, I think it was either on your website, is like something that you love speaking about, is just doing the simple things well and how that gets you unstuck. It's like, no part of me surprised to see the success that you've had based on the consistency I've seen you put in with all of the things that you've done. Right.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And you're absolutely right. Because at the end of the day, like if you were horrible at basketball and I told you to go shoot 100 free throws every day for the next year, you're either going to do one of two things. We're going to be, in a year, you're going to be an impressive free throw shooter, or you have stopped after like a month and a half and you're going to be horrible, right? There's kind of no in between on that. Like, you're not going to go a year and still suck at the free throw, because you're going to slowly figure out what works for you. Now, you might have pivoted. I mean, think of what you just mentioned. You had this other podcast, you had a co-host on, right? Yep. And you decide to pivot it for whatever reason, but because you started to figure out, and this is why I'm such a big believer in prototyping. It's like, do something a little bit, and then you might tweak it and try to go around another corner and do something a little different. But it's still kind of, that origination is still there. It's just slowly maneuvered over time. It doesn't mean you've stopped or quit. You've just got smarter. right? It's like a rat trying to go through a maze. You've getting smarter over time of what works for you and what doesn't. So I think the consistency, that's the only way anything ever gets done. Now I have it. And part of this, by the way, if I'm out here touting, just get started and you got to be consistent, whatever, and I'm not doing any of that. Like if my podcast, I haven't launched an episode in a year and I haven't done other things, like how am I going to even stand here and say, just get started, be consistent, do whatever. So I'm in the grind with everyone else, right? I'm doing that. Like I'll give you an example. You talk about consistency. I made a commitment this year, and I've been doing CrossFit for a lot of years. I've tried to do more running races, and I try to be like do some athletic things to push me. But I made a commitment at the end of the year. I said, you know what? I've never in my life, at least that I can remember, did something every single day for the entire year. Now, of course, I brush my teeth and stuff. You know, I'm not talking about the simple stuff. So I made a commitment. I said I'm going to do 50 push-ups and 50 squats every single day in 2024. So now here we are. We're in month 9. I haven't missed a day. Do the math on that. How many, you know how strong yeah, that's like it's like 15,000. I think it's close. But do you know how strong I'm not, I don't know if you can tell by the camera here, but I'm like tall and I wouldn't say lanky anymore. I'm in more muscular than I used to be, but like I'm tall and in a thinner frame. So my chest has always been struggled. And that was one of the reasons I used push-ups, because I said, okay, I want to build up my chest this way. And I can go now and rip off push-ups all day long, where before I would struggle. It goes back to what you said. It's just you're building that muscle over and over. And muscle in the metaphoric sense, right? It could be a variety of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying people need to do stuff every day. I'm not saying you have to do, athletic stuff. What I say is the smallest micro step. I'm doing the same thing now that we're talking about it. I'm doing the same thing with a book. I'm writing my first self-development book this year. But I didn't want to commit because I don't know about you. Like I have a lot of other stuff going on, like sitting down like Stephen Pressfield does or these other authors do for like an hour, 2, 3 a day and writing thousands of words. I can't do that. I literally it's not number 1 on my priority list, nor is it number 4, 5, or 6 because I have other things. But what I said, you know what? Can I commit to 500 words every week? That seems pretty, you write newsletters, 500 words is not a lot, right? When you think about it in the grand scheme of things. So I said, okay.
Depends on the quality that you're setting for yourself too, though. Anyone, you can vomit 500 words. Even vomiting 500 words a week takes pretty consistent effort. But
you're
500
right.
publishable words is.
But the goal was
it's not too difficult, but it's non-trivial. I like it. I'd approve.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. But I said, this is the rough draft though, because again, I'll go back and have to edit and do all that stuff. But
exactly.
But if I don't have the words, if I don't have so anyways, I said 500 words every week. So now again, we're in week like 36, haven't missed a week. And I have well over 25,000 words because I've written more than 500 words some weeks. But again, it just goes back to partly it's because I'm stubborn. Partly it's because I'm like, I put these things on my wall, if you will, and on the bulletin board. And I'm like, I'm not going to miss now. But I've also built the confidence up in myself over many years by starting. And that's the main thesis of saying all that was, I don't know if the Brian of 6 or 7 years ago could have done that. He would have come up with an excuse. He would have made some sort of reason why it wasn't good for him. But I've built up this confidence over many years where I never was like that just by doing the thing. And the more I did the thing, the more I got confident. And that's how I can sit here and say like, oh yeah, I've had these consistent wins this year. I might not have done that 5 or 6 years ago purely because I didn't have that leg to stand on.
Yeah, I'm just making so many notes of different ideas that are coming to me from all the things that you're saying. One person I think you should check out, just even for inspiration, because the power of daily is a recurring theme that I've encountered from hundreds of interviews that I've done. Mm-hmm. And 2 stories stick out. One, there's this I say friend, we haven't really met in person yet. Sometimes I think people online that have had one interaction refer to each other as friends too quickly. He's I'm sure we'd become friends if we spent more time knowing each other. But Tyler Cho, he has a podcast. And he has been putting out a daily tweet of a video of his workout for 900 days in a row.
Wow.
And he's, just doing like handstand push-ups with one hand while balancing on barbells. Like he's doing the most obnoxiously impressive things. It's like, yeah, because it's just the power of everyday nonstop. And a few years ago, I saw, this is, I think I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I'm dating myself by saying this. But like a few years ago, this was only like 3 years ago, whatever. But I was at in New York City when Gary Vee and Beeple were doing this live event together at the first NFT NYC. And it was like Beeple kind of this really inspirational documentary that they were doing a live premiere of Beeple just being like this broke dude. And then this like absolutely, there's a lot of external circumstance there, but the Beeple everydays, just like being there and hearing them speak was just transformational in terms of the power of true everyday non-commitment. I think what you've really grasped is setting the bar low such that the consistency is high, and taking the long perspective. Because I mean, how many people listening to this have ever heard themselves say the words, it's week 36 of the year and I'm still going strong with that intention? Across 3 different habits.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how many people have ever heard those words come out of their own mouth, spoken truthfully, but you just have a different power when you can feel that way.
Yeah. You hit a nail on the head there. It's the small micro win. That's what it is. Because for me, like with the push-ups and what have you, like today, actually, I had some calls this morning and I went down to eat some lunch. And typically I have a gym in my garage that I'll go down there, but I was just like, you know what? I'm going to be up here in the living room. I'm just going to pump out. I'm going to do 10 sets of 5 push-ups, 5 air squats, 5 push-ups, 5 air. I'm just going to pump them out. Right. And just get them done. Right. Get my 50-50 out. Other times I'll be like out at the gym, like at CrossFit, and that'll be part of my warm up. There's other days though where like I'll do like 10 in the morning and then I'll scatter a few, I'll add it up over the course of the day, but it's kind of, helter skelter. But again, it goes back, what's that goal? So I think for most people, it doesn't matter what it is. It's really, what do you want to accomplish? I think you have to set that first. Like, what is my goal? And then we have to just break it down in the smallest chunks possible. Because at the end of the day, it's 18,300 push-ups and 18,300 air squats will be by the end of the year. We have 366 days this year because of leap year. And that's how many it'll be. I didn't say I'm going to do 18,300 day one. I just knew that I had to do 50 each day. That's it. And I think if we take that mentality, it's just like if you want to lose 100 pounds, you don't lose 100 pounds day one. I can't tell you when you're going to lose 100. But what I can tell you is if you walk around the block every day, if you take out a lot of the, high fructose corn syrups and the processed foods, there's a good chance that after week 1, after week 2, after month 1, all of a sudden you're going to see a decline in weight because it just happens over time as you put in the effort. So the effort might not be perfect every day and it might not be top notch. It's not going to be a Olympic gold caliber workout. That's okay. Sometimes you just have to show up just to prove to yourself that you can and let the next day come,
Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with Anthony Pompliano. I used to work, I used to work pretty closely with him when I was, working for him in a previous job. And this is an idea that he shared on a podcast that really resonated with me. That's kind of become a general mental model I've used across the board. And something I interpret a lot of things through in retrospect. And, some podcast interviewers trying to fish him to say some crazy bullish Bitcoin comment. He's like, how much Bitcoin should someone buy if they've never bought any Bitcoin? And his answer is $1. He's like, just buy $1 of Bitcoin. And the whole idea is I'm just in the business of getting people off zero. And that's how I feel about a lot of what I do with what we sell. And then also whether it's a personal thing or a business thing, I like to sell my offer. Low commitment is look, I'm not saying you need to become the next Cody Sanchez, the next Pomp, the next Gary Vee, but do you agree that we should be publishing more than 0 content? Should your business have a presence? Let's get you off 0. And you can use that same framework for you're doing a great job with your personal habits. It's you're not saying you're going to be the next Jordan Harbinger, but you're going to get off 0. You're going to get started. That's what just getting started is. It's he's like, I can tell you this. I think the wrong amount of Bitcoin for someone to have is $0. That's the wrong amount of Bitcoin to have.
Right.
And so same thing, the wrong amount of experience to have doing this is no experience. One day, one trial, just different ways to get people off of 0. And so that's a frame that I find I think what you and I've done in this conversation to some extent is it's the same reason you hear the same idea in 8 different ways, but everyone's just a different type of learner with different emotional states and different baggage in their head. And you're just trying all the different ways to get them to respond. So it's like, here's different ways to I'm going to make up a word here, taxonomize, just different taxonomies, different semantics for different ideas, and hopefully one of them clicks. And that's why you publish content and say the same idea in different ways. So your prospects, like, you don't say it this way, you give them a case study, doesn't resonate. You give them an example, but suddenly you post a piece of content that has representation, someone who looks like them. That's the time it clicks. So just a lot of cool ideas floating around today.
Well, and one thing on that, because I like the Pomp's thought of the dollar. I mean, that's how I thought about the podcast. I never thought about 400 and number 430 launching. I just published the next one. Like, that's how I think about it. And because I don't believe just get started, like getting started in the whole just get started philosophy. Getting started is not the hardest part. Like, getting started is actually easy because most people are energized and excited. Like, oh, I'm going to go out and try to lose weight today, or I'm going to go start that podcast, whatever. Where I find, I noticed this with my son. He just started band last year in 6th grade. And I noticed the plateau effect. That's kind of where this idea kind of came up, where he got really good fast. And then he like was upset and angry and like, I'm not getting better. I'm whatever. And that's where most people, they do the workout. We see this in New Year's resolutions, right? They do it for a week or two. So that's where I think to Pom's point is you go back to the simple. Like, if you're coming out of the gate in the new year and you're like, you know what, I'm going to work out for 2 hours a day and I'm going to really go after it, most likely you are going to get burned out in a week or two. So why don't you come out of the gate with 10 minutes a day or take a walk around the block for the first week and ease into it? Because that's going to be more achievable because you're going to hit that plateau. The thought is, how big is that plateau you're hitting? Like, how big is the cliff that you're going to hit? And hopefully it's not a massive one where you can there's, like I was saying, how I built up confidence is there've been small little cliffs that I've been able to climb over versus this one massive one where it's like, oh, I'm going to write a book next month. Okay. When? Like, how am I going to prioritize my life?
Great question.
I could,
That's such a disarming question. Okay. When? Oh, damn.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, be realistic about it. And I think if more folks thought in the realistic sense and broke it down into small bites, it's amazing what you can achieve. It really is. It's actually so simple.
Have you heard of Akira the Dawn?
Cure of the what?
Akira the Dawn.
Oh, I thought you said the cure. No, I don't. I haven't.
All right. This is, I said this a bit ago that I'm a business nerd with whatever. This is like taking that to the nth degree on the standard deviation chart. But he makes music of like David Goggins, Joe Rogan, Jocko, like all like the standard internet business bro thought leaders. And he just like takes them and sets it to lo-fi and makes music. And there's a Goggins track that he talks about breaking the pull-up record. Yeah. And like the chorus is like, I'm just doing the math, bro. I'm doing the math, bro. Like, and he's like, like the record, I only have to do a pull-up every 2 minutes for a day straight. He's like, I can do a pull-up every 2 minutes for 24 hours straight. I did the math. Like, people aren't willing to do the math to find a way to recontextualize their goals to make them seem possible. So I'll recommend that. But there are like 3 big categories of questions I wanted to get into, and we're reaching the point where we're not going to have time for all of them. There's, one thing, because I always like to outline, and your process could be a whole other thing to dive into some other time. I like to show up where I like to show up with one question and then we just have a conversation, but I like to be prepared for, you gave me short answers to every question and I still have enough material to keep the conversation flowing. Like, I like to make outlines to throw them away. But they're still useful sometimes. And I say that because, one, I'd love to get into, whether we have time for this or not, just your sales coaching expertise, because the idea of plateauing, what that brings to mind to me is a model I call kind of like living at 210. The idea that, water only boil, like, that's when I feel like the coach is most effective. It's like, maybe your son's putting on all the practice and all the effort, but he feels like, because that's what becomes frustrating is like, and that's, I think you could probably, you were basically giving me 10 minutes of free sales consulting before we hit recording, because I literally came in hot off a sales call. It's like, I'm doing everything right. I'm investing these resources, this, and this, but this like one thing's not going right. And that's like the difference between 210 and 212 is the water boils or it doesn't boil. Right. And you come in as the expert and you're like, here's how to work literally 1% better. Here's like one question you should ask at the end of your calls that changes everything. It's like, you're already getting calls on the calendar. You're already doing this. You're already doing this, but you're not doing this one thing. And so, I don't know what the question is there into your coaching. But that was just something I wanted to share.
I would say, no, I would say one thing on that point is I think you have to be open to coaching, right? Because if you are, I've had plenty of people, not just in sales coaching, but in general, and I'm sure I could agree that I probably was this way earlier in my life where I knew it all. I have a 12-year-old that's going through this right now. He
Yep.
knows it all. And the question now, him and I have a really good relationship where I will pose to him, I said, what are the chances that you know everything possible in the world? And of course, his answer can't be, I do. So it's an opportunity for like a teachable moment there. Like, hey, bud, like there's a lot of things you don't know. And the more I kind of tell him, I say, when daddy looks at things like your perspective, what the more I know, the less, or excuse me, the more I learn, the less I know. That's
Yep.
what I try to explain to them. The more I learn, the less I know. And I think he gets it. He's again still at 12. I don't know if you have any kids, but like he can be stubborn there. But I think that all teenagers and stuff go through that. It's the same with anyone else, any adult. Like if you go into like, okay, something's wrong here, and I'm willing for it to be me. I'm willing to like have the just pull it back, pull the Wizard of Oz, pull the curtain back, and just tell me, okay, if you go and you try to coach people and they're like, yeah, but so and so, and that you're never going to come to the answer. So I think the first step is, are you willing to be open to be coached? And that's the first thing. And if you're like, well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if, then you have to check yourself first. Like there's some sort of internal dialogue you have to have. Anyways, that's a random tangent, but I think it's like coaching. I look at it as like when you go to the doctor, like you go to the eye doctor, because I have bad eyes, and they're like, oh, we're going to change your, we're going to tweak it. Is it one or two? Is it two or, whatever they go through. And I walk out of there with like a new prescription. I'm like, literally how long, like what was you're talking about deviation from like the last time it was good to this new time? Like, have I been seeing bad for 3 months? Now I saw okay, but obviously it's not 100% crisp. So has it been a little blurry? So that's really what a coach is. It's to open up your eyes and say like, okay, I can clear this up a little bit, give you a little more focus. It's not going to change everything, because at the end of the day, I look at it from a sales standpoint, you have to be you. You are not going to sell like anyone else, or vice versa, right? You have to be you. And then you have to build everything with who you are. Because like, if you're not aggressive person, or you're not confrontational, or you're not, like I'm a very direct seller. I know plenty successful sales professionals that are the complete opposite of me. They go in with a very soft approach. Like that's just how they are. And they do very well. So you have to figure out who you are and match that up. You can't try to be, because this person does it this way, I'm going to do it. You might not be able to pull that off. It's not going to be authentic. So anyway, just a couple thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm trying to get, shredded like Andy Elliott, but I don't know if I need to sell the same way if you've seen him.
Yeah, I've seen
But,
him.
this is one of my, I don't know if we're going to have time for the second question. So this is a question I try to ask every single time, and I might be, 100% for asking it here. What has been the most impactful piece of content that you've created? Impact can be measured as it sparked the most conversations. It could be, the obvious one, it brought in the most dollars and direct opportunities. It taught you the lesson, like something that just had an outsized, like most content, people listen to it, they comment, it's great, you learn something. But this just like, I don't know if it has to be an inflection point, that something that stands out is like, when I interviewed this person, everything changed, or I got more comments, like 100 times more than usual, or this, I put out this LinkedIn post and I got 10 meetings literally because of this one post. Just one most impactful single piece of content you've published, or the one that comes to mind, rather than making it a favorite.
Yeah, I'm going to give you two ones. I'll give you two. Let's start with the first one, though. I mean, I think the Seth Godin interview I had in 2020 was probably the most impactful from a standpoint of not just people close to me, because again, at the end of the day, like I kind of look at it like Gladiator. Like I'm in the arena, like the people shouting don't bother me as much anymore. I'm not saying they don't bother me at times, but like I'm in there, I'm doing it. I'm trying to create, and I'm kind of trying to create on my own what's best for me. But I think the Seth Godin interview, because Seth Godin, you mentioned that name, almost anyone in business or entrepreneurship or anything knows him, right? Marketing. And that was a big get for me because I'd read his podcast for so long. Like, again, so inspirational. And the fact that literally one cold email to him and he came on, and I guess he enjoyed it because he came on a second time last year. So that was cool. But I would say that one because that's probably got the most visibility in terms of views and listenership and responses and comments. I don't know what the number is now. I mean, it's got to be 30, 40, 50,000 now, probably listens or views or what have you over multiple platforms, which is big for my platform, which isn't, I don't have a massive platform.
That's not insignificant whatsoever.
Yeah. And he's such a good interview too. I mean, he's so thoughtful. I just love how he responds. Anyways, he's super cool. I would say the other piece though is my first children's book. And what I didn't tell you before when I talked about the Just Get Started podcast journey was that I wrote my first children's book in 2012 when my son was born. I probably had 60, 70% of it done, like a big rough draft. Certainly had to be refined, but I put it on the shelf for almost actually it was probably over 7 years before I picked it up again to publish it because I didn't believe I was a children's book author. I didn't think I could publish a children's book. That's for someone else, And when I picked that back up and I got the illustrator and I finally published it in May of 2021, the impact of other people, I just know the impact to me. And I have it right up here framed on my wall because my mentor, Rob, told me to frame it because he's like, you need to look at that every day. And when you get down in yourself, like you're not good enough, just remember what you've done when you didn't think you could do it. And so I would say piece of content, maybe not worldwide fame, but for me, it was probably the most impactful was getting that published book, Luke's first round of golf. Because what was personal to me, it's about me and my son. It's about golfing. It's about us doing it when he would grow, and just having that physical book, like you could do something totally different than you ever thought you could do. That's been inspirational for me personally in my journey.
Yeah. Well, that's a great place to wrap things up. You're publishing content online in a lot of places. I'll give you an opportunity to shout them out, but appreciate you coming on. Appreciate the vibes that you're putting into the world and the things that you're sharing and that you're teaching. And there'd be plenty of reason for us to continue the conversation in the future because I'm barely ate into my outline.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it, and I love the interview style that you do. So kudos to you. Love the back and forth, and I thought it was very conversational. So, like I said, awesome. And I listened to some of the other ones, and it was similar. So, like I said, super cool. I've been on some that are, it's hard to have a conversation. So I give you a lot of credit there.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
My website's probably the best, BrianOndrako.com. I'll spell it out in case people are listening to audio, BrianOndrako.com. And that's kind of the hub for everything. I got my podcasts and books and blog and everything like that. I would say LinkedIn is maybe the social platform I'm probably spending the most time on. And taking kind of some time off the others as much as possible, just because for me, it's, I don't know, not as valuable. And I'm trying to focus on building my content in terms of on my website and building this email subscribers and stuff like that. LinkedIn's been a great hub though, outside of that.
Amazing. Well, Brian, I appreciate it. I know you've got places to go and things to do. So thanks so much for your time.
Yeah. Appreciate you. Thank you.